entitled Valar Morghulis. What do you got to say before we get this started?
Hey, man, not much. I think the Talkin TV audience
All right, Pat. So we're here, Game of Thrones Season 2 finale. Things are also heating up, I would also like to say, in the world of television as well. We got the primetime Emmys tonight because somehow they managed to cobble together enough shows to actually have an Emmys this year for all of the 5 shows that we got during COVID. What's it called? You know, we got Succession coming back in a couple of weeks. Like, things are really starting to heat up in the television space as we continue to build on our road towards the Game of Thrones finale and towards House of the Dragon. So we're here at the Season 2 finale, and I feel like the biggest takeaway already is just what a different feeling this is from the first season finale. Like, we wrapped up Season 1. It was more so you're like, wow, that was kind of a long road, but like the ending, like it feels incredibly satisfying because we got this awesome buildup and this awesome payoff to like all of this long buildup. And here it's almost like, wow, it's almost like a breath of relief. Like there was so much shit that happened this season. We got like at least double the amount of new characters to come in. We had like double the storylines.
Dom, was that sort of a joke there with the using the S word? Because this episode
it might have been
full of
crap. It might have been.
Literally,
yeah.
We get it in the second scene,
like in the second scene. But so the way that we're gonna do this tonight is that rather than do by how we did it last season, where we did it by breaking down like kind of each character's wrap up to the journey, we had a lot of characters that were wrapping up their journey. So we're primarily gonna hit it by setting and primarily like the focus character on each setting, and of course, we're kicking it off tonight. But before we do, I should say that, of course, the title of this episode comes from the ancient Valyrian phrase that is used by the Braavosi. It directly translates to "all men must die." It's a common phrase used amongst the Braavosi, and also it's kind of a signature go-to phrase amongst the Faceless Men. Obviously, it's what Jaqen tells Arya when he gives her the coin that will later come and pay off at some point 2 seasons down the road. But Pat, you want to get this going?
Yeah, I don't even think it pays off 2 seasons down the road. It's like it's a teaser
seasons down the road. That's right.
And then the third season is when it actually comes up. So
yes.
Hey, I can't wait for it. It's good stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. But so we finished this season. It's crazy. Like before we get into it, just like what were your thoughts on this season just in general? Like how it compared to the first season with just like there was a lot of stuff that happened this season.
Yeah, I will say that season 2 is really awesome compared to season 1. It like Tyrion and dealing with King's Landing and having all the intrigue that's taking place really separates the 2 seasons from each other. Ned Stark really can't navigate that world, and therefore he almost just gets steamrolled the entire time, and it's sort of a tragic season for the Starks. But here comes Tyrion, and he's shaking things up, and he's making things happen that need to happen, and people are basically ungrateful for it. And hey, it's really packed with drama this particular season. What I will say is, going forward in the next couple seasons, when the budget kind of keeps going up, season 2 is going to pale in comparison to what we got coming next.
Oh yeah, well, like this is. Like I said last week, Blackwater really does just scratch the surface as far as the increased budget that this show sees going forward. Because again, this is only the beginning. Like we got the Battle of the Wall coming, we've got the Dragon Pit coming, we've got the White Walker attack at Hardcomb coming. Like the budget is about to be upped on this show in ways that television had not seen before. But let's get into this episode. Let's wrap up the myriad of storylines that we have to cover. So we start off King's Landing. The opening shot, Tyrion wakes up after the battle. He sees Grand Maester Pycelle, fresh out of jail, is standing over him, kind of, trading barbs back at him, saying like, throws him a coin for his troubles. He immediately screams to Podrick, obviously not trusting in the situation. He's in a different room. He doesn't know what's going on. And of course, he probably
I think the coin part is the best thing we have going on.
That was a good payoff. That was a good little payoff right there.
Yeah, essentially, it's like all this work you did through season 2, saving the realm,
meaningless,
making sure Joffrey is still king, that the Lannisters still have power, all that stuff that he's done for them, and all he gets is some sort of coin,
right?
Which he's accustomed of throwing around throughout the entire series at this point. So it kind of turns around on him, and it's like he gets discarded just like he has discarded people in the past.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of whenever low income workers at like a factory want to raise or just a little bit more time off, and the best they get is a pizza party. It's kind of what it feels like there. I'm not speaking from personal experience there at all, but I do find it interesting as far as the comparison, because there's a lot of comparisons that go on this season with Tyrion to Ned Stark in the last season, and it's like, wow, he did all of this stuff and he gets a demotion, and he basically gets belittled and kind of has to shoulder the blame for all the bad stuff that Joffrey kind of brought on everyone this season. And it's almost like, wow, it's like, why did I do this again? I'm almost wondering, I'm like, wow, at the very least, Ned lost his head. It's like I'm constantly at a loss. It's like, who got it worse, like Ned or Tyrion, as far as kind of their treatment after their respective turn as Hand of the King. But later on,
Tyrion knows how to navigate these waters, so he's able to hang in there longer. And as we'll see over the next season and a half, it doesn't get really that much better for him.
It really doesn't.
But he basically stays alive, and that's all he has to do.
Yeah, I don't think they wrote the song Staying Alive for him, but I do find it interesting. I had this written as a point in my notes here, which is that even though the Lannisters win at the Battle of Blackwater, Tyrion still loses. And I feel like that's the most fitting, accurate phrase. And it just, the things keep piling on him. Varys comes and tells him, he's like, Bronn's been demoted from the leader of the Kings, from the leader of the City Watch. Tyrion's no longer Hand of the King. His dad has sent the Hill tribesmen home, and Tyrion has nothing but Shay to console him there, And as we're gonna see in the next season, things are this is only the beginning. Things are only gonna get worse for Tyrion from here on out.
I think the main thing that has happened here is Varys has basically, Tyrion has earned Varys's respect.
Yes,
and they're allies now, and they're able to talk to each other sort of more bluntly than before.
Yes,
and I think Tyrion has sort of gotten this, ally that he didn't have before, and I think that's really what he's gained for saving King's Landing.
Absolutely, yeah. And then we later move into the throne room scene with, oh man, can we just talk about this shot for a second? Why? Why is it necessary? I'm sorry. If we're just talking about the logistics of that shot of Tywin riding the horse into the throne room, it's like, and so the horse takes a shit in the middle of the screen, right before he walks in, and it's not like a quick blinker you'll miss at moment. There was a full 2-second pause where it hovers on the horse's legs as they drop the fucking droppings right onto the floor before he walks in.
What I will say, Dom, you're a little erratic here with all the expletives, but what I will say is that this seems to be a very... It's immature filmmaking, in my opinion. It's like, hey, let's just have this thing. Wouldn't it be funny? Sure, in a childish way, I think it's funny, but at the end of the day, I'd rather it not be in my television. Yeah,
I don't get it. It's one of the most confusing things I think I've ever seen on screen. I'm just like, why did this need to be there? But I don't know. It's like, what, just so Tywin can show off his power as far as okay, he's in charge again. I feel like there are a couple different ways that you could have showed that. This is Tywin Lannister we're talking about. He's only the most powerful man in the Seven Kingdoms for at least 4 seasons. But
it's also, Dom, it's really weird because at the end of last week's episode, Tywin comes in on foot and he's like, I've won the day and everything. And then, here it is, the second scene, and now Joffrey's on the throne and Tywin's coming in again to, get his, welcome, hey, you won the war for us type of, here, you're the hand, of the king. And it's to me, it's really odd that they went from, ending last week's episode with him entering the throne room and then again having a brand new scene where he enters it for a second time.
Right. This time on a horse.
Yeah, and it's really strange where they put those two scenes because it seems rather redundant and almost unnecessary. It's like, oh, hey, you're the hand of the king, and then he just sort of exits, and then hey, let's talk about Lord Baelish. Let's talk about the Tyrells.
We're the Tyrells.
It's really Tywin didn't need to be in that scene at all.
Like at
all, in my
all.
opinion, he could have just had the pin and been, basically.
It has to be like
standing over
Tywin didn't even
Joffrey.
need to be there just in general. It's like he was already hand of the king from the beginning. Tyrion was literally just his stand-in, I almost felt like it would have been like almost more powerful if he wasn't there. Like, wow, okay, so he's already gotten to ruling like that quickly, It's like we almost didn't kind of need this show of force and pomp and circumstance. So like, I mean, hey, Benioff and Weiss did say that it's like, hey, this was literally our film school. And I guess it shows because it seems like it's clear that they have no idea what the fuck they're doing. But I just wanted to shout out Eric because Eric just said, we actually get another win for the show because ironically enough, Septa Unella, the actress who plays her, Hannah Waddingham, just won the Emmy for supporting actress for comedy for Ted Lasso. So congrats, Septa Unella. I still think that's like one of the funniest things ever when I found out that was Septa Unella. I'm like, where does Rebecca from Ted Lasso, why does she look so familiar? Then I realized, I'm like, oh, that's the nun that tortured Cersei. That makes so much sense now. But anyway, that was just a brief little side distraction. So obviously, Joffrey rewards Littlefinger for bringing the Tyrells into the fold by making him the Lord of Harrenhal. You can see Varys is just off to the side. Varys just looks disgusted in this scene. He's like, okay, like this is too much for Littlefinger. Littlefinger's getting too much power. Something needs to be done. And of course, they make the big grandiose statement, that to Marjorie. They're like, she's like, "Oh, I've come to love you from afar." It's like turning on just a full Natalie Dormer sex appeal, playing to Joffrey's weaknesses, and of course, Joffrey. I find it interesting here that Joffrey's like still willing to like maintain his vow to Sansa. I'm assuming that just comes from his like absolutely despicable mind of just like wanting to keep her in his employ for nothing else than to torture her.
Yeah, to me, Dom, this scene was particularly played out in a nice way because it seemed like it was totally rehearsed between Joffrey, Cersei, and basically Pycelle.
Pycelle.
Yeah, so for the most part, it's like they had to say these things basically to drop Sansa and to allow for Marjorie to happen. And, this is sort of something I wish they played up a little more. Maybe Tywin sort of set this in motion and, fed them their lines so that they would end up with this betrothal between Marjorie and Joffrey. But they didn't go that route. It's sort of just like on the surface.
Right.
Your mind can take you to that spot like it did mine. But, it's very crafty.
It does feel very rehearsed.
Yeah, the language that's happening in this throne room scene.
I could just imagine Tywin like off to the side, just being like the guy, just like the key PA, just like feeding him the line, just be like, okay, now you say this. I can just imagine like just Tywin off in the corner doing that role. But obviously Joffrey ends up coming around. He's like, all right, the vow was made before the Starks betrayed them, so I'll happily take Marjorie's hand in marriage. Sansa is just thrilled. She's like, yeah, I don't have to marry Joffrey. The happy day. Happy day. And of course, Littlefinger comes around the corner and is like, you know that just because you're not marrying him anymore doesn't mean that you're out of the fire yet, And it kind of like brings her back down to reality a little bit there.
Yeah, he uses the phrasing, he's unlikely to give up his playthings, right? So it's one of those things where Sansa's fate is definitely still locked in to be pretty terrible and maybe even worse than before because, the whole fact that she's supposed to be the queen is not something that can protect her anymore.
Right, definitely. If anything, she's in a more vulnerable position now than she was before, because at the very least before she was going to be the queen, but now it's like, what happens now? But of course, this is kind of the beginning of like the Littlefinger Sansa saga that like takes us through the rest of the series all the way up to his demise until season 7 where he promises to bring her home. Again, it's just beginning of like, it's really weird. Littlefinger is a problematic character, to say the least, when it comes to like his appetites, if you will. And like, it's kind of interesting Sansa because she reminds him of Catelyn. Like, it's just weird. It's just weird, is all that I'm going to say.
Yeah, I don't think they explore that as much.
Definitely not. I feel like that's one of those things that they were setting up to like be really explored in the books once like Littlefinger's kind of whole plan in the books was revealed, which by the way is completely different than his plan in the show.
Yeah, I think here it's like, they play with that tension. It doesn't really ever pay off in the entire series. But the main thing is, now he has Harrenhal. He's going to also orchestrate her escape and, basically go and maintain more territories. Like, he's basically an up and comer, and he's trying to become a power in the realms. And, this is how he's going to try to ascend to the Iron Throne. And he knows that it's, he's playing a longer game than most of the people in the series.
Yes, indeed. And who's playing the same long game and absolutely despises that? Varys. Because last thing we're going to talk about with King's Landing is Varys. This is the beginning. Oh, man, poor Raw. The other thing, too, is this episode officially sets up and solidified. It's like, okay, all of these characters are going to die. Not in this particular episode, but all these characters are going to die because we get it. It's like, okay, so we know, obviously, Corrin is going to die. We know all these Night's Watch members are going to die. We know Robb is going to die. We know Stannis is going to die at some point. And poor Roz. Poor Raj. She came to King's Landing to escape in order to just, because she knew that that's where all the drama was going to be. And who knew that she was marching right towards her death? Because, of course.
Well, I think it's definitely Raz, went there because that's, all the men were going south for war. So all the work was going to migrate south. And, then she gets there and she becomes, pretty powerful. I guess not really powerful, but really popular. And really high up there in Littlefinger's establishments. And therefore, her life is not as bad as it was, being in Winterfell doing the same job. But, for the most part, it's not working out for her because she's just disposable. And Joffrey taught her that. And, it's basically Varys is trying to bargain a deal and say, hey, your employment with Lord Baelish is going to get you killed, but I like to protect my,
my investment, if you will.
My employees is
but he's saying it in so many words, if we're being frank here.
Yeah, but as we all know, those of us that have definitely watched the show, and this is a spoiler show, so if you don't know, now you know. Varys is not going to help her in any way.
Not one bit.
It just leads to her demise, which I don't know happens in the third season, I believe.
Oh, yeah, it does. And it's a gruesome demise, to say the least. But Varys is definitely like, all right, Littlefinger's got a little bit too much power. Time to start market checking him. Time to do something. Does it work out in the long run? I'm not quite sure. We'll see. But so that's pretty much it for the King's Landing of it all. So we got a quick couple of solo scenes next. So next, obviously, we switch to the Riverlands. We've got two major scenes that happen here. The first one, obviously, is Brienne and Jaime kind of continuing on their journey. That's going to kind of define them for the next season on their way to King's Landing. Obviously, one of my favorite pairings, honestly, that, of course, gets bastardized like amongst everything else in the last season. They come across these women that, as Jaime says, these women of the night, tavern girls that were hung by Stark soldiers, obviously. And Brienne makes it very clear that she serves Catelyn Stark, not the Starks themselves. She goes to cut down the girls. Unfortunately, 3 Stark soldiers happen upon them. Jaime does his best in order to help her out and cover up for them. Jaime, surprisingly willing to go along with the flow, prisoner. He's not trying to make a mess for everything because he knows that, anything that goes bad for her is going to go bad for himself. And of course, the Starks, they almost get away with it too. Their story they come up with is pretty convincing, but unfortunately, the one Stark soldier recognizes Jaime from the Battle of Whispering Wood. Brienne is forced to kill the Stark soldiers, almost in a way that surprises Jaime even when she kills that last soldier.
Didn't it come up in the conversation that they kill 2 fast and they kill 1 slowly? And so Brienne turns it on them, and basically kills 2 of the other guys quickly, and then is like, hey, I killed 2 quickly. Now it's
2 girls fast, right? I think is the the term that she uses.
So
I particularly the one shot where she pulls out the 2 swords at once and slices the guy's throat. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty high action in this sequence, and I think that it sells the lovability of this pairing as we go into the third season. So definitely Brienne and Jaime are a pairing that we're going to learn to love, if we don't love them already, throughout the sort of remainder of the series.
Absolutely. And it's more primarily a setup scene, but it's one that it gives us some really, really, probably one of the best story arcs that we get next season. And then, of course, the other major scene of the Riverlands is Arya, Gendry, and Hot Pie after escaping from Harrenhal. They're walking through the Riverlands, and of course, Arya sees Jaqen. She goes up to him. She's like, "How did you find me?" And he's like, "Everything that I've done." And these are the questions that you're asking. It's almost like he's reminding her. It's like, "Yeah, you kind of did majorly fuck up this entire time this season." But she kind of really comes to her senses, and she realizes that you can do all this stuff. You've got to teach me how to do it. And he's like, "Come with me to Bravo. Sure, you'll do that." And she almost says, "She's like, I want to. I really want to. but I gotta find my mother and I gotta find my brother first. I gotta help them in some way first. You know, at this point, it's like, I don't know. It's really weird because Arya's heart is still in the right place, but her mind quite isn't. You know, it's kind of a matter of, it's like, I don't, but also I'm not a fan of what Jaqen does here, because what Jaqen does here is kind of like complete counterbalance to what we see of him later on. Of course, there is also the implication that the Jaqen that we meet later on in season 5 could be a completely different character than the Jaqen that we see now, because obviously it's proven, it's officially, like, if it wasn't already obvious here, he is a faceless man. You know, the faceless men do not have one set identity that they revolve everything around. It's part of the reason why Arya has such a hard time adjusting there. But obviously
I don't think it's something that they really develop in the series. It remains a mystery, because the Jaqen we know in season 2 definitely doesn't match the Jaqen that we sort of learn about later in season, I believe, 5 and 6.
Right.
And you know, it's one of those things where this idea that, you know, once you become a part of the faceless people, the identities are passed around, and therefore, you know, are you ever really who you are anymore? And, you know, that's one of the things that they never really played with at the end of the series is this really Arya, or is this just someone that basically has come back to Westeros to, you know, pay back all the wrongs that was done to Arya, because Arya's personality is part of the faceless men.
It would definitely make sense. It would definitely make a lot of sense, like, because that does not seem like Arya in those last 2 seasons, you know?
Yeah, but at the end of the day, you're talking about Arya like hanging out with them, and, you know, oh, I love you, family, and
right.
You know, that's sort of like, I wish there was a little more tension between Arya and the other Starks when she returns.
Yeah.
But that's a story for another time. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah, once we get to the last 2 seasons and how problematic they are.
Yeah, right now we basically have, you know, the teaser that there's something much bigger for Arya, but she's not ready to sort of cross that threshold, and, you know, that's not going to happen, like I said in the beginning. For
definitely
another,
not. Yeah, she needs at least 2 seasons, at least 2 seasons with the Brotherhood, and then with the Hound first. You know, kind of.
Yeah, she's got to grow a little bit before she basically goes and on her journey to find the faceless men. Yeah,
definitely. Arya went through a lot this season, but, and though I will say that she made a lot of mistakes, but she definitely, I will say, learned a lot as far as on her journey. And it ends with Jaqen saying that this isn't where we must part, but he gives her the Braavosi coin, and it's like, you ever want to find me again in Braavos, just give that coin to any man from Braavos and utter the words, Valar Morghulis, as in the title of the episode. Again, it's this ancient Braavosi phrase that kind of connects all of them, because the Braavosi, obviously, they worship the many-faced god. So they kind of have this understanding, this relationship, this understanding of death that a lot of Westerosian just people don't in general do. They kind of almost embrace it in a way that, like, most people in general are scared of it, you know? And so it's very interesting kind of how it's like, okay, you can just get some random schlub off the street, but if they've got the coin in the phrase, hey, immediate free passage to Braavos. Hey, I would love it if something like that actually existed in the real world. That would just make traveling for me a lot easier. You just go up to any random guy and just like, hey, here's this coin, and then you give them a phrase, and they're like, cool, hop in this car. You're totally cool in our book, you know? I love how simpler things were in, like, ancient medieval times.
Yeah, well,
you know?
it's a secret society type thing that people from Braavos subscribe to, and they know about it. So that's something, again, that they don't really explore in the series, specifically, even though Arya gets there and does her, you know, what is it? She starts screaming about cockles and clams.
Like, oh yeah, oysters, clams, and cockles.
Yeah,
oysters, clams, and cockles.
So like they focus on her being, you know, a seafood,
a seafood cart girl,
but they don't really explain too much of the connection between the faceless men and the city. And have, you know, if she's doing all this training in that city, like, why is there no?
It was almost
like
kind
fear,
of a whole thing.
like,
it was, you know what it screamed? It was the definition to me of like, oh, wrap it up. We got to get her back to Westeros. We got to have her help out in the fight against the White Walkers. Wrap it up, because again, her arc inexplicably leads to her killing the Night King. Okay,
I don't know. Again, we're dwelling on this.
Getting ahead of ourselves here, but yeah.
It's one of those things. This is definitely a great seed. It's planted well. It takes a while for it to grow and get to where it needs to go, and I think that's one of the strengths of this series, is that it's able to bring things up early and have, you know, Jaqen is pretty significant in season 2, and we know about this character, we know about this, you know, mystery, and it's able to be put on the back burner for 2.5 seasons, and once they slide back into it, it seems effortless.
Absolutely.
So I think this is one of those things where the show does know how to put things into the universe, put them on the back burner, and bring them back almost seamlessly.
Right.
You know what is not seamless?
Stannis, and the fact that he doesn't know when to quit. He doesn't know when to call it quits. Like, Jesus, he just suffered like the biggest loss of his life, and he's still gonna try and come back from that. Like,
well, I think Melisandre's sales pitch here.
Oh man, worst
is great.
Sales pitch. You know, I guess, but I'm sorry. If I was a rational man, I'd be like, look, I bet my entire everything on you, and this happened. Like.
Yeah, so Stannis is basically, I lost the battle.
I lost everything, and now I'm going to strangle you because I'm mad.
Yeah, so he wants to strangle her. He's done, and she just goes, yeah, the Lord's in you.
The Lord's in
and
you.
He's like, oh man.
And that's what kind of lets him go. I'm just kind of like, what?
She plays to his ego, and it's like, you're the Lord, and or whatever. It's in you, whatever, and it's very surprising that he has an about face. And essentially is like, oh, hey, this could work. And she's like, look into the flames with me. And he looks into the flames. And he's like, I got it. I understand.
I see it. Now.
So
hey, I will say that flame trick that works. It worked on the Hound in season 7. So like that does work. Like those red priestesses, they can conjure up stuff in the fire.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those things where Stannis in this particular episode is very minute. It's basically I've lost the battle and like things are going poorly, and why didn't you predict this? And it's like, well, no, this is just one battle. The war is going to be fought over years. Yes. Thousands will die, and this prediction, I think it really sets up the idea, the trouble of the Night King north of the Wall coming down. The fact that Melisandre is saying that this is going to be lasting for years, and for the most part, it does. And every season that we watch, the war keeps on going. It's extended. It seems never ending. Right. So again, this is another seed that's planted where, even though Melisandre might be wrong in terms of who the Lord of Light, is backing ultimately, the one thing that's very interesting here is that you're telling the audience that this war is almost endless. And no matter, what happened at Blackwater and the fact that the Tyrells and Lannisters combined, this war is not over, and it will continue. More people will die, and therefore, the Night King, as it grows as a character in this series, is going to be very, very problematic. You know what else is going to be problematic, Dom?
Rob and his marriage to Talisa. Because you want to talk about another instance where everyone is just telling him, it's like, dude, you are making a mistake here, dude. And I love how too. Can we just talk about this for a second? I love how too the only justification that he has for Catelyn telling him that he fucked up and made a mistake is, oh, you were reckless by letting the Kingslayer go. And I'm like, bruh.
Yeah, well, this is his justification, right? It's like, my daddy's dead.
Justification ever. It's like, my dad's dead. I don't know where my home is. I don't know how I feel. It's being an angsty teen. He's pulling a Jon. It's so ironic that the minute that Jon actually starts to grow up, Rob immediately becomes an angsty teen and gives in to his woes. And it's like, I want to have sex because I haven't had it in forever.
Yeah, and Rob is basic. I don't know if it's all about the lust there, Dom, but
I don't know. It seems pretty lust-driven.
Yeah, maybe, but it's also love. It's the person he wants to spend his time with. I don't know if it's all about just the lust. I think it's a passion of like being together and chasing that love and whatever. It's much more than just the act in the bedroom. Yeah. But for the most part, it's one of those things where his main justification that he tells Catelyn is, "Hey, you arranged this marriage, and that's why I don't want it." And it's like him rebelling.
I arranged this marriage so that I could get you a fucking bridge so that we could get to King's Landing and win this war. It's like don't throw that back in my face. But whatever, he doesn't want to listen. He's a king now. He's officially got it. It's gone to his head. Is what's happening here.
Listen, if you're going to arrange a marriage, make sure that you have a priest nearby and you make sure it happens.
Make sure that it's written and signed in stone, and make sure also that apparently Rob sees the girl because he's like, I have to marry a girl that I've never even met before.
Yeah,
And, like,
they should have never crossed that bridge.
No.
Or Walter Frey should have never let them cross that bridge without the marriage. But,
Absolutely.
hey, listen, it is what it is. Rob is going to make the worst decision of his life. He's going to sign his death warrant here.
Literally.
In the end of season 2. And, I think it's one of those things. This show does a really good job of like showing you characters that don't play the game. And this is it. This is my thesis. Rob basically, arranged or agreed to this marriage. He's going to say no, and he's going to do complete opposite thing, marry, in secret, and, chase the woman that he loves. And ultimately, at the end of the day, if you don't know in this episode that Rob's days are numbered in the show,
then you clearly haven't been watching the same show that we have.
Exactly. I don't know what else to tell you, but it's only a matter of time before his bad decision making that has basically come out of nowhere. He's been winning the war, so to speak.
Right. What's the phrase that they use next season? It's he's won every battle, but he's losing the war.
Exactly. So it's one of those things where he's winning battles, but he's not gaining any real ground. Right. And so he's just aimlessly going around killing a bunch of Lannisters. And
honestly, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to lie. It's one of those things where it's like, I know that obviously it's like, but like the other Northerners, they aren't necessarily wrong when they say that Rob lost his way, because this is officially like the solidifying fact that where he went south with kind of this great, like kind of, justifiable, hoorah, like, yeah, we're going to bring honor and glory and we're going to bring independence back to the North and we're going to avenge all the wrongs that the South has done to us. And now he's just kind of dolloping around, like falling for girls, not breaking his vows, like not focusing on what needs to be done, like kind of, it's like everything that he's heard, it's like the minute that like between kind of them losing Renly as a potential ally, him meeting Talisa, the Greyjoys taking the North, and then Kat letting Jaime go in an act of desperation. It's like all of these things are happening to him, and he's realizing that maybe his foothold. But it's almost like the worst part is that he's losing his foothold, and he doesn't realize it. He still thinks that he's in this big position of prominence, and again, it's going to come back to bite him in the worst way possible. Because again, as we've been hinting at, next season is Red Wedding season, so all y'all better get ready for it.
Listen, all I know is that Rob, ultimately in hindsight, should have probably retreated to the north. He should have solidified his bannermen because, his father just died. They rallied the cause. Like, people did come to their banner. But you got to think about, like, the idea that, Ned Stark died and you are a new sort of leader. And not everybody's going to be behind you, and they're going to be judging you, and they're going to be looking for ways to pick at your power and become free themselves. And so I don't think Rob plays that game. He just assumes and takes it for granted that all the bannermen are behind him. And I think this is one of the tricks that the show plays on us, that Lord Bolton basically understands that this is his moment to seize power. And yes, he gets the confidence of Rob, and he starts playing Rob behind the scenes, and he just waits it out and makes his move. And, ultimately, if it wasn't for Rob taking everyone in the north-south and basically leaving the homeland unguarded, basically Rob could have maintained Winterfell, could have maintained order in the north, and basically the sort of the separation between King's Landing and the north, the south and the north, could have been lifetimes. Basically just a civil war. Maybe no major battles. Maybe it's literally just like skirmishes on the border. But the main thing is the whole idea of going down there for justice and killing the Lannisters and seeking revenge. Basically, it petered out, and they just continued going for it. Right. And I think that's one of the reasons why Rob really ends up in the grave the way he does. Absolutely.
And so, of course, now I'm speaking of back up north, we cut back up north to Winterfell, and Theon. Oh, poor Theon. Poor Theon.
Theon has the greatest speech ever, and especially when
it's hilarious. It's like, amazing.
Yeah, like first of all,
I love the reaction to after they knock him out, where they're just like, I thought he would never shut up, and he's like, it was a good speech. I wanted to let him finish. It's like I wanted to let him have his moment.
Well, it's the trumpeter that starts the sequence, right? It's the Northmen are outside. They're blowing a trumpet. It's siege tactics. Theon's losing his mind because he can't sleep. It's too noisy.
He's like, I will kill that whole. Maester Lewin is giving him like some pretty damn good advice right now. He's like, look, you have no choice. He's like, you got 50 men. They got over 200. They got over 500. There is no way you're winning this. It's like, retreat, get out of here, head north to the wall, take the black. All your crimes will be forgiven. He's like, and have Jon kill me? Like,
yeah, again, this is another example of people not playing the game properly, because Lewin gives him the whole playbook. You're going to do this, you're going to do that. He's like basically
Lewin pulling a Bill Belichick right here.
Yeah, he's talking into I guess this is a data reference, but Tom Brady's ear. I guess it's Mac Jones now, but
right.
He's talking to Mac Jones here, which is Theon, and he's an unproven guy, and Theon is not listening to his advice, and he's not really pushing his team forward. So the main thing is Theon says, the hell with Lewin, we're gonna fight anyway. It kind of jump cuts to him, out in the courtyard, like, we're gonna do it and we're gonna kill them all, and or we're gonna die, and people are gonna honor us. It's really Shakespearean in terms of like Henry V, like Band of Brothers, like we're gonna, it's really well done in terms of like a recall to that famous Agincourt scene.
Yeah, definitely.
It's like a very bastardized version of that speech.
Kind of, yeah. And it's almost like Theon is like admitting his desperation. He's almost like coming to terms with the fact that like, yeah, I am most likely gonna die. But he almost like understands it's like, yeah, at this point, dying is like kind of quite literally my only option, because my options are literally run and then be mistreated by my family for the rest of my life and probably killed by them for being a traitor and a coward, or B, run, somehow make it to the wall, and then have Jon kill me, and then, if I do have to do it, Jon, live with the shame of killing those two farm boys for the rest of my life. Like, either way, it's like, this is just a perfect solidifying factor of the fact that Theon is screwed no matter what direction he goes in.
And what does he say about killing the trumpeter? You're gonna be like memorized in gold.
Yeah. He's like whoever killed that fucking horn blower will be forever cast as in like the horns of Pike or something like that. Something iron
it's
related.
So ridiculous. And then it cuts to this nice close up shot, like shoulders up, and he just raises his sword, and he's just like,
and the dagger's like, boop! Yeah, it's like a Three Stooges like knocks him on the head.
Exactly, but his eyes are bugging out, and he's just screaming like, "Oh!"
Yeah, great overacting. Great overacting by Alfie Allen, by the way.
It's perfect, and it's quite possibly
the music
one of the
is building up, like everyone's getting amped up, everyone's cheering, and then it's the perfect comedic finish, like actually surprisingly like tense dramatic scene.
Yeah, I'm surprised that I haven't seen that particular shot as a meme all over social media, because it is amazing. It's well shot. It's perfect for the moment.
Right. Of all amazing meme potentials that could have come out of that one.
Yeah, and it's Theon's sort of last moment before it really takes a dark turn. Before things really
take a dark turn for him. And unfortunately, it ends, of course. Dagmir stabs Lewin with a spear after he comes out. Bran and Rickon and Osha and Hodor and them, they come out of the crypts. They discover that Winterfell has been burned to the ground. And this is the part that, again, it's left a little bit ambiguous, because we last see the Ironborn leaving with Theon, obviously, presumably to hand him over to the Northerners before they go home, but then they come out. So it's never really made clear whether the Ironborn burned Winterfell or whether it was the forces led by Ramsay, obviously, that burned them to the ground. We don't actually see Ramsay in this until next season, when he does the whole dog and pony show with Theon. But they go out. They find Lewin dying in the Godswood. Lewin tells Osha to get them to Jon because it's not safe for them in the north anymore, and they can't go south because there's too many enemies that way. They leave. He has Osha kill him.
Oh yeah, that was a great scene too. Where like, you want milk of the poppy? He's like, God damn it, I don't want milk of the poppy. No. Just make it quick.
Make it quick.
And it's Lewin is
Lewin is a Northerner by heart. He may be old and he may be a Maester, but he is a Northerner by heart, and he goes out just like one. It's honestly like, even though it's a death that happens off screen, it's probably like the only good death that happens off screen in this show. So R.I.P. Maester Lewin. Only 2 seasons, but like a memorable character to say the least. And it ends with like this really ominous shot of the 4 of them and the 2 direwolves leaving, as you just see the smoke billowing up from Winterfell, and it's a haunting sight to say the least.
No,
so
for sure,
we cut across the narrow sea to Karth. We're finally getting wrapped up with hopefully the final and like indexing Daenerys' just whole pointless journey, which just her wandering around this one house, seeing a bunch of visions of the future. And again, like I really hate Benioff and Weiss for this, because this is an image that they pulled right from the books, and then we see it paid off in the worst way possible in the final 2 episodes of the show, where she goes into the House of the Undying. She starts going through all these different rooms with all these different visions and seeing all this different crazy stuff. And then she actually has, this really, really touching moment. There's a lot of really touching and like gut-wrenching moments in this episode. You know, the thing with Theon, you know, the whole thing with Jon and Corran that happens. What's it called? Tyrion and Shay, Arya and Jackie. Like, there's a lot of like really heartbreaking, like emotional stuff, like Lewin's death. And this is one of them where Daenerys goes north of the wall, sees a tent, and she sees, you know, a vision of Drogo holding her undead child. It's Jason Momoa's final appearance on the show. And it's really touching and heartfelt, because for a moment she's almost fooled, and she's like, man, this is the life that I could have had if he had lived. And then she kind of realizes, she's like, I got to put this aside. This is a vision. And she walks in. It almost makes her just wandering around and just wasting all of her time in Karth. That almost makes it worth it. It almost does, because of how.
Well, I will say these visions are good. The visions are good, yes. And but then she leaves, and the warlock is there.
We have to go back to the warlock, and I'm just like, okay. At this point, I'm like, burn this sucker down. And the good thing is that's exactly what happened. So
at this time, you're looking at the clock, and it's like
you're just 50, like, okay, it's a literal like we got to wrap this up.
Yeah, it's 52 minutes of a 58-minute episode, and it's like, oh man, we got to get rid of this. And it's just like, this is going to be your new home. We'll put you in chains next to your dragons. And then
I love the excuse that he gives too, where it's just like, also it's like, oh, when your dragons reawakened, our magic was reborn. So I'm like, wait, were you just like hunkering around, just like chilling in the dark in this weird tower for all of these hundreds of years with no magic, and all of a sudden it's like, poof, your magic comes back? I was like, what? Just the thought of that in my head. I'm like, what the hell?
I don't know, but basically, it's they don't take any time to explain any of it, and then once she's in chains, it looks like things are gonna go south for her. Yep. She basically just says,
Dracarys, Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah, and then the dragons just spit out some fire, and
quite literally spitting fire.
Yeah, it's basically, it's terrible. It's the warlock dies, the chains disappear.
It's one of the biggest sources of comedy I think I've ever seen. She may as well have literally just, instead of Dracarys, like Dracarys quite literally just becomes her Deus Ex Machina, but you may as well have just literally said Deus Ex Machina. And it ends, of course, they escape like no problem. It just turns, it's like, okay, so the minute that she killed this one warlock, that like that was all the magic. I'm like, what? Did they not have money to like pay more like actors to be as more warlocks? Like there are more warlocks here.
The main thing is like they just needed to get out of this storyline, and I think that was the lamest part, is the confrontation with the warlock, because it happened so quick. It's like mic drop, cut to Zaro sleeping in bed,
and then they arrest him. They bring him to his great friggin' like safe that he's been bragging about.
And this scene is fantastic.
So good. I love it.
It's the fact is he's the king of Karth. He could do so much for her, but his vault is empty. And they decide to leave him and
Doria, who of course betrayed Daenerys.
Exactly.
There's also a deleted scene that reveals that she's actually the one that strangled Irri, her Dothraki handmaiden that died a couple of episodes ago. And they locked him
that totally makes sense. They set that up, but they obviously didn't put that in the show.
Yeah. One of a couple. There's a lot of really good deleted scenes in this. Like if you ever get a chance, like I haven't checked them out. There's a couple of really, really good ones that like missed the cut. And I'm like, damn, I almost wish this had been in there. But like I understood why they cut that one. But anyway, so she locks him in the safe, and then they raid the rest of the castle, and they're like, okay, it looks real. And it's like, well, it was all fake, and it's like, well, yeah, but it's gold, so it'll at least buy us a ship, and like, also, I love it too. This is the first of a couple instances where it's like, okay, so all the Dothraki were killed, but then all of a sudden there's like more, and they're fine, and then they just disappear the next minute. And it's kind of like the same thing as what happened in the last season, where it's like, okay, so most of her Dothraki died in the fight against the Night King, but then there's more of them, and then they just leave Westeros amicably. And I'm like, oh yeah, because that's what the Dothraki do. They just leave stuff like completely.
I don't know. Yeah, it makes no sense. Basically, a lot of TV shows do this. This is not a Walking Dead podcast, but just watch that show where one zombie is walking through the woods.
Defender for it.
And you got 8 people, and it's like, oh, we can't possibly kill this one zombie. And then cut to like 50 zombies are now right on top of them. Yep. It makes no sense. They come out of nowhere. It's really like,
I call them plot zombies.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I guess it's the background extras. It's like it doesn't really matter if it's logical. It's like we're just going to jump into that shot and it's going to be what it is. So this is the same thing with all of a sudden Dothraki are showing up and backing her up.
Right.
We don't have to know how she got more Dothraki. They're
just there.
Apparently they survived.
Yeah, and also I love how this is the payoff also for that scene when it's like when the Dothraki were like sniffing around like all the different like jaded peacocks as far as like seeing how they could steal the jewels, and then the payoff for that is George is like, yes, raid all of them, like and continue to like tear down civilization, and I'm like, okay, cool. So mixed messages much? All right, but look, she's got the gold, she can pay for a ship, and we're gonna see her sail off to parts unknown and actually finally become the badass that she's that has been so far been building up to. But like, I think that's the same thing to say as far as the card storyline. It's a waste of a storyline. There's a reason why it's one of the most criticized storylines, not only just within the show, but also kind of within the entire Game of Thrones lore. A lot of people have admitted that like nothing happens. I think even Martin has gone back and admitted it's like, yeah, this is one of the weaker storylines that came up.
Well, I think Dany in both seasons is weak. The only issue with the second season is it's basically all her.
Right. There's no payoff. The first season
it's what her growth is.
Right. The first season has a payoff as far as like her, like, okay, she's coming into her own. She's this leader and she actually learns and experiences what it's like as a leader before it's all stripped from her. This season, it's like, she doesn't actually get a chance to do that. She just kind of wanders around, yells a lot, and then goes and sees some pretty images before she uses her Deus Ex Machina to kill the warlock. And like,
well, you have more character. You have more character development in the first season because you have Jason Momoa, his character. You have
Jorah kind of like introducing her and like helping her understand like the customs of her people and everything.
You have her brother who's kind of basically a big a-hole. So for the most part. I'm just going to say, like, there's a lot of pieces going on in Dany's storyline in the first season, and maybe it's not the best executed. Like, I think the witch, when they introduced that storyline,
that still becomes weaker and weaker the more I think about it.
It tanks it for me. But in season 2, there's really not that many moving pieces. It's really Dany, her dragons, kind of arguing back and forth with Jorah, and the warlock stealing the dragons, King of Karth. Like none of the things really land. Right. You don't get enough time to really think about it. It's I don't know. It's just I guess the way it's structured.
The thing I'm still getting over is just like freaking Zaro 3 episodes ago was like, I didn't steal your dragons, and then the next scene being like, hey, I stole your dragons, and then they just kill the 13. It's hilarious.
I think the pieces that they have are good, but
they just don't put them together.
There's not enough screen time.
No,
there's not enough screen time. There's not enough development, and I get it. There's more important things to do this season, which was in King's Landing with Tyrion, with Stannis. It's a very heavy Westeros season.
Yes.
Dany gets kind of put on the back burner for sure. And, we need to give her a storyline. It's not terrible, but it's not equal weight to everything else. And I think that's ultimately what the problem
Yes, definitely. But we're definitely going to see a lot of improvement next season once we get into her Storm of Swords arc that happens over the next 2 seasons. Like, I'm definitely looking for. I would probably say that of all of Daenerys' seasons, her strongest one, I'm not counting the last 2 seasons because the last 2 seasons do everyone dirty, but her 2 strongest seasons as far as arcs go are probably seasons 3 and 5, if I had to say, are probably my 2 favorites as far as everything with her goes. Now, we move on to the last storyline that we have for this episode and for this season. I will say that this one is definitely... This entire arc was definitely the most set up because there was not necessarily a lot of bad stuff happening here, but Jon definitely is another one that's kind of put heavily on the back burner this season as far as, okay, so he is primarily used to kind of introduce us to the cultures that are north of the wall and kind of set us up for the coming conflict as far as how the wildlings are going to mix into the fray going forward, as well as kind of like really, this is going to be the first major instance that we see of like the White Walkers in force, because previously in the last season, we really only saw them in individual pocketed moments, like the opening scene, obviously where we saw the White Walker kill the 3 Night's Watchmen, and then obviously the scene later where the dead bodies were brought into the wall. But here we have them marching towards the encampment. Corin manages to break free, knock out some of the wildlings. He fights with Jon, obviously in this big, grandiose staged mock fight. It happens a little bit differently in the books. In the books, Ghost helps Jon kill Corran, but in this one, Jon gets the upper hand. He knocks Corran's sword aside, and then Corran kind of pauses in for a bit in order to let Jon stab him. Then before he dies, he kind of reminds him, like, we are the Watchers on the Wall, like kind of reminding him of like why he did this for Jon and like what they're trying to do here, as far as like reminding Jon that, like, don't lose track of where your loyalties lie. It's a big
I also think that's a message to him where, listen, I just sacrificed myself in this fashion.
Yeah, what are you going to do now?
I am a Watcher of the Wall. Like, it is whatever it takes. And I think that's the dying message that he's conveying to Jon is, you are a member of the Night's Watch. It is whatever it takes.
Yes, and it kind of, again, it accomplishes the thing that they're trying to do, which is that it tells the wildlings that, Jon can be trusted. This is a guy who they may be able to actually work with. Egret even says, is like, look, when we get to Mance, tell him that that's the guy who killed Corran Halfhand, And so they end up, he ends up cutting him loose, and they were literally like right there at the encampment, and they kind of see over the cliff, and there's these hundreds, like these just waves and rows of wildlings. And Jon really
probably one of the best moments of the season 2.
Yeah,
is just revealing how strong and massive
the wildling army really is.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things where it's like, oh, that's where this has been leading, and this is going to be problematic for the Night's Watch.
Yes, absolutely. Again, so much so that it ends up taking 2 seasons before we actually get to see the battle, but it is absolutely well worth it because, again, the Battle of the Wall, I don't think I've emphasized this enough. I know that obviously on a technical scale, the hard home attack, the loot train attack, the Battle of the Bastards are technically better and bigger on a larger scale, but I have a really big soft spot in my heart for the Battle of the Wall and kind of just how that goes. But of course,
I think it's just all the characters that are involved, in the Night's Watch and the wildlings. Very good acting, very good storylines. Like it's one of those things where anytime they take you north of the Wall, for the most part, you're getting something juicy in this show. It might not be the biggest storyline. It might not be the bread and butter of the episode, but it's all the mystery that happens in the show, and it's all around the Night's King and what's happening, and it's leading to ultimately the finale of the series. Everything that happens north of the Wall. So, it's like you get all this Game of Thrones that's happening, the backstab, trying to get to the throne. But ultimately you have this
it's
going
meaningless.
on.
It's meaningless because ultimately this is where the conflict is. This is the true enemy, as is said by numerous people throughout the course of the show. And we see it obviously in the next sequence when Sam, Gren, and Ed. How long have they been digging this trench? I feel like they've been digging this trench and like finding, obviously shit in order to use for wood and everything. I feel like they've been doing this for like at least a couple days now, but obviously they hear the 3 horns blow. It's kind of the known thing north of the Wall. 1 horn for Rangers, 2 horns for wildlings, 3 horns for White Walkers, and they both kind of realize like what danger they were in. They immediately run for it. They just leave Sam. Right there. They're like, fuck it, he's dead weight, we're going for it. And Sam, like, the snows immediately set in. Sam has to hide behind a rock, and the ending shot we see is just like of the White Walker just marching past and the dead horses. We see kind of, again, very early on, like we see, the early on White Walkers where, again, they're moving slow, as I call like the White Walker versions of the Whites before they turn into like the 28 days later, like Rage versions of the Whites that we see later on. And the camera pulls back as we just see this massive force moving through the snow towards the fists of the first men as they begin to march on the Night's Watch. I just have 2 questions about this scene before we wrap up, which is, one, how in the fuck does that tiny force of Night's Watchmen, how do any of them survive against this massive force of White Walkers? And 2, why the fuck does the White Walker leave Sam? I've been asking myself this question since I saw it originally. I'm like, okay, so Sam's a dead man here, obviously. I feel like there's so many instances where Sam is quite literally looking death in the face and it just like kind of passes by. Like, did it not consider him a significant threat? Like what's the thought process for you there?
I'm not sure. Again, every time I watch this, it's like, why did Sam not die? I think I'm in the same boat as you. I just kind of like moved past it. I'm like, okay, they just didn't kill him. I don't try to overthink it because, it's one of those things where like, if you look at the rest of the series, anytime a White Walker gets that close, you're pretty much dead. And in this case, it's like they just march past him, easy peasy, no problem. The only thing, I guess, this just popped into my mind, but he was at Craster's, and maybe it had something to do with
that is true. That is true.
The way he handled himself, maybe the White Walkers were sort of watching or something like that, and it's like, oh, hey, this is someone that's I don't know. I have no idea. I'm grabbing.
It's really confusing. It's a really confusing, but it's a really awesome shot. It's a really awesome way to end the episode. It's a really awesome way to end the season. I kind of like the bookmark between this and between the beginning of last season and the end of this season, where it's like, okay, the beginning of last season you saw like the inkling of the White Walkers. Now you see, okay, this is the beginning. You're like, okay, this is the setup for what the true enemy is, and obviously we see the payoff. Obviously, 3 seasons later in season 5.
I think you just really need this to set up the fact that the White Walkers are a big enemy and they're coming to dinner. This is
indeed.
This is
like,
the fact that
food.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things where like they're going to be a problem going forward. They have an army. It's not just like 1 or 2 of them kind of wandering around in the woods. It is a growing population, and it's going to be significantly difficult to take them on.
Yes,
and
indeed.
I think that's really what it is. Maybe the scene wasn't shot 100% where to me and you it looks to make sense, but maybe they just didn't see him. He was covered in snow. He saw them clearly. End of story. Right. Maybe they had a more pressing mission, and he was too much time for them.
Yes, indeed.
Who knows? I really don't know.
Yeah, but that was it. That was season 2. Again, there was so much that happened this season, but again, it sets up a lot for the next season and for the next couple of seasons. Obviously, we saw our first major example of the War of the Five Kings. A lot more political maneuvering, a lot more characters introduced. This was the season ultimately that showed us like, okay, so season 1 we have our main characters, but now this is the scope. This is what we're dealing with now as far as the coming conflict that we are going to be following for the next couple seasons. As far as the White Walkers, as far as the intrigue in King's Landing, as far as across the Narrow Sea, as far as we got our first look at kind of like more of the civilian life that we're going to continue to follow over the next couple seasons. All of that and more was set up this season, and ultimately just upped the action factor as well, I think. So all of those and more, I would think ultimately make season 2 definitely more of an engaging watch than season 1. So that was our season 2 finale, people. Valar Morghulis will be back next week. We're going to be kicking off season 3 immediately afterwards. No break this time with season 3, the season 3 premiere, Valar Dohaeris. But let us know what you thought of season 2 in the comment section below. Let us know if you have any suggestions as far as stuff that you would like to see us do in addition to stuff that we've been doing next season, or if you just like the show the way it is. Pat, where can the good people find you?
Hey, listen, Dom, I'm here on Talkin TV, Talking Thrones, obviously. And hey, I keep saying this every week, but Instagram at Patrick W. Huber, sometime we'll post. I think it will happen. Maybe I had some photos the other day. I just never got to the app. But hey, that's where you can find me.
Indeed. And you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Movie Nerd Reviews, Facebook and Instagram at Talkin TV Podcast, where we post every single day, twice a day. And of course, be sure to click the subscribe button, click the like button. That way you guys can get notified every time we put up new content. Again, we've got Talking Thrones episodes every Sunday. This week, we've got the morning show, season 2 premiere that Chris and I did. We've got our Halloween first time watch series on Wednesdays. And of course, remember, people, Battle of the Thrones is always coming. 12 seasons of a short film, and watch more fucking movies. We'll see you guys next time.